Well, new at 6, experts in Wisconsin are taking a hard look at the systemic issues that exist in dementia patients. And as Sean Gallagher shows us, it's something that impacts people of color at a much higher rate.
African Americans are twice as likely to have dementia as their white counterparts, but experts say they are far less likely to be diagnosed. They say those diagnoses have more to do with societal factors than genetics.
Why are African Americans so overburdened by disease disparities?
The Wisconsin Alzheimer's Institute is looking into why people of color are more heavily impacted by dementia, while also battling back against the perception that it doesn't affect them.
That's an older white person's disease.
Dementia is expected to have increasing disparities among communities of color in just the next 10 years. Experts say by 2030, Latinos and African Americans will make up nearly 40% of the families impacted by Alzheimer's disease. That's because African Americans are also disproportionately impacted with higher blood pressure, coronary diseases, diabetes, and many other health factors, all of which can influence dementia.
It's not caused by one thing. So being able to treat is one of the primary reasons why an early diagnosis is so important.
We're talking about health conditions such as diabetes, cardiovascular. Those are things that we have to look into and start figuring out how to address as we're looking at Alzheimer's disease as it relates to African Americans.
There are also other elements these researchers believe are leading to the disparities.
The socioeconomic issues, social determinants of health are just as equally as important as the comorbid or comorbid conditions, not either or, but more of and both.
Additionally, there's a general mistrust of the healthcare system by the African American community and increasing concerns over the cost of healthcare, where 20% say they won't go to the doctor because of the cost. This is why experts say African Americans are less likely to be diagnosed with dementia.
Access is really critical to this. And then when we finally get there, we have a really poor experience with our provider. And that then turns us off and shakes us off of our foundation to keep moving forward.
In order to have the best outcome, these experts say early detection is key. However, symptoms may not fully present themselves for up to 20 years, and it can be difficult to detect a difference between normal mental progression and something that may indicate a serious issue.
You should be recognizing the different changes in your memory, especially if you are having difficulty completing familiar tasks. And so some of those things could be like planning and cooking a meal, paying bills, or doing household tasks.
The WAI says taking care of yourself now with better diet and exercise can go a long way towards taking care of your brain long term. They also have a number of resources for families facing a dementia diagnosis. We'll post that on tmj4.com. Just click on this story.
The 6th leading killer in our country. But before Alzheimer's disease can take your life, it steals your memories.
And research shows African Americans have a greater risk. New this morning, 24-hour News 8's Marvis Herring learned from the experts that there are ways to make yourself less vulnerable. Good morning, Marvis.
Good morning, Teresa and Casey. Diabetes, high blood pressure, and heart disease, they all tend to affect the Black community more than others. But knowing your status and family's history when it comes to those conditions, it could be life-changing.
Dad, you know I loved you.
Michelle Battle's encounter with brain disease has been painful. Complications from her dad's dementia took his life in late December.
I done the best that I could with what I had.
And her mom's been battling Alzheimer's for 7 years.
It was like, how is that possible? Both parents?
The Grand Rapids native recalled the unforgettable memories of her father, Louis Edward Battle Sr., before his diagnosis.
He was a salesman, and he can pretty much sell you anything.
Known as a sharp dresser, it never surprised Michelle to catch her dad grabbing his second or third shower of the day. That changed as his memory became cloudy.
He would be like, well, I took a shower. And it's like, no, that was a couple of days ago, so I knew my dad, that was not my dad.
Dementia is an umbrella term.
The Greater Michigan chapter of the Alzheimer's Association explained that out of more than 85 types of dementia, Alzheimer's affects the most people. Vascular dementia ranks second.
And that's where a lot of the African American population falls into that category because of the untreated heart issues.
Guidance from the Alzheimer's Association and care resources were game changers for Michelle. They offered support groups and advice for new caregivers and explained how her parents may have become more susceptible to mental impairment.
They both have diabetes, high blood pressure, heart problems, and those are statistics that relate to dementia.
Education is going to be the key.
Michelle joined the Alzheimer's Association's efforts to educate the local Black community, hoping to save a life by sharing her personal story. But she said her dad's 2009 diagnosis was no mistake.
I didn't have my dad when I was a little girl, so it was just God that gave him back to me for 7 years for us to bond, and I would cherish every moment of that.
And Michelle says she wants the local African American community to know that it's okay to ask more questions about dementia, and the local Alzheimer's Association feels the same.
Sure, anybody who's been through what she's been through hears that and knows exactly what she's talking about.
Definitely.
That wasn't her dad. So to think that there will be ways to prevent that.
Oh yeah, and really she had a long road with that, both parents. She was diagnosed with a rare form of cancer during that time as well last year. So really it was so nice to talk with her, to see that strength and her sharing her story. She really wants to help get that word out. So some good information there as well. Yeah.
Gruesome disease, great story, great awareness to that topic. Thanks, Marvis.
Good morning and welcome to our annual Sister to Sister Tea, Living and Coping with Alzheimer's, providing quality care to Alzheimer's patients. I am Tanya Pratt, President of the Lansing Alumnae Chapter of Delta Sigma Theta Sorority Incorporated. Delta Sigma Theta Sorority Incorporated is a public service organization founded in 1913 on the campus of Howard University by 22 dynamic college-educated women. We have been in the Lansing community for over 60 years, and we have had the opportunity to present so many marvelous and dynamic programs. Yet this is another. We are proud to be able to partner with AARP to bring this program and this important topic to the community. We know there are numerous people within the community who make it known to others that they are a caregiver or a provider for someone suffering with Alzheimer's. We felt it was important for us to do our part in the community and bring forth important knowledge and resources that are available to you in our community. We hope that you sit back, you relax, and you enjoy the program we have put together for you today. Enjoy the rest of the day. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam President. Good morning. My name is Rashane Lonzo, and on behalf of the PP&D Committee, we thank you in advance for joining us this morning for our annual Sister to Sister Tea. This session is intended to equip us with a basic understanding of Alzheimer's disease, the 7 stages of Alzheimer's, and other common types of dementia, as mentioned in the pre-roll. And we'll also learn about the 6 pillars of brain health. We will be providing resources to describe specific steps that we all can take at any age to optimize our chances of maintaining our cognitive health. Now, who doesn't appreciate a giveaway? So we have 2 great giveaways, a massage gift certificate and a restaurant gift card. So you're gonna have dinner on a Delta's, but there's a requirement. You have to be present to win, and it will be at the end of the presentation. We'll also have lots of information, so we strongly encourage you to use the chat to ask questions. If something comes to mind, just drop it in the chat. Now we'll learn about the 7 stages of Alzheimer's.
Stage 1, normal outward behavior. When your loved one is in this early phase, they won't have symptoms that you can spot. Only an imaging test can tell if they have Alzheimer's. Stage 2, very mild changes. You still may not notice anything amiss in your loved one's behavior, but you may be picking up on small differences. This could include forgetting a word or misplacing objects.
Stage 3 is a mild decline. At this stage, you start to notice changes in your loved one's thinking and reasoning. A, forget something that they just read. B, they ask the same questions over and over again. C, they can't remember names when meeting new people.
Stage 4, moderate decline. During this phase, the problems in stage 3 with reasoning and thinking become more obvious, such as forgetting details about themselves or forgetting what month or season it is.
Stage 5, moderately severe decline. Your loved one might start to lose track of where they are and what time it is. They might have trouble remembering their address, phone number, or where they went to school. They could get confused about what type of clothes to wear for the day or even the season. Stage 6, severe decline. As Alzheimer's progresses, your loved one might recognize faces but forget names. They might also mistake a person for someone else. For instance, they might mistake their spouse for their children. Delusions might set in, such as thinking they have to go to work when they no longer have a job. At this stage, your loved one might also need help with daily living activities.
Stage 7, very severe decline. Stage 7 is the final stage because this disease is a terminal illness. Many basic abilities fade, such as eating, walking, and even sitting up. One may also lose their ability to swallow. Being able to communicate or respond to their environment may also become challenging. They may need assistance with all daily activities.
Wow. Okay, so understanding what the stages are helps us to possibly identify if we have loved ones that may be in one of those stages. I know when my grandmother first began forgetting things, my mom and my aunt was thinking, oh, wait a minute, she's just getting old. And I remember them referring to parts of her experience as old timers. No. There was something else going on. So understanding these stages and where people are can help us get information early for them. At this time, I would like to take the opportunity to introduce our Alzheimer's specialist from AARP. Lisa Denton Cooper serves as Manager of Advocacy for AARP Michigan, a nonpartisan 501c4 organization with approximately 1.3 million members in Michigan. In that role, she provides strategic leadership and direction for AARP's state and federal legislative advocacy work in Michigan. She is passionate about dementia and family caregiving issues in particular, and is the co-chair of the Michigan Dementia Coalition. She was the primary author of the coalition's 2019 through 2022 roadmap for creating a dementia-capable Michigan. Lisa has a bachelor's degree in economics and psychology from the University of Michigan and earned her law degree from the University of Michigan Law School in 1991. Prior to joining AARP in 2011, Lisa worked for 12 years as legal counsel and senior policy analyst for the Michigan House of Representatives and Michigan Senate, and for 2 years as congressional staffer. In the mid-1990s, she served as a staff attorney for the UAW Ford Legal Services Plan, where she specialized in senior issues. Additionally, Lisa served 3 terms as the Ingham County Commissioner from 2000 to 2006 and was a member of the Clinton-Eaton-Ingham Community Mental Health Authority Board between 2002 and 2019. She served as a family caregiver for her dad, Jack, who passed away in 2017 after have lived with frontotemporal dementia. Let's give a warm virtual welcome to Lisa Denton Cooper.
Thank you, Dr. Rashane Lonzo, soon to be Dr. Rashane Lonzo, for those very kind words. And thank you to President Pratt and to you, the Deltas, for hosting today's event. And I also want to call out and give thanks to my partner in this effort in our community, Dr. Saray Eaton, with whom I work here at AARP as she's a volunteer, and I'm leading up this effort as Rashane shared with you. These issues are so near and dear to my heart that I am really delighted to join you for today's discussion. And I'm actually going to skip ahead to the end of my comments for a moment to tell you what I hope that we'll leave you with today. First of all, I want to leave you with a sense of hope. And second, I want to leave you with a sense of what you can do to become more empowered on behalf of yourself and your family and your friends. And that might surprise you, especially what all you just heard on the video. But that's why I'm glad that you are here. As Rashane noted, I work for AARP, which, as you probably know, is an organization that advocates for people on behalf of people who are age 50 and over. And AARP is involved in this particular subject because it's on the minds and impacting the lives of more and more of our members in Michigan and across the country. So AARP's purpose is to empower people to choose how they live as they age. Now, no one chooses to have dementia, but we can help people choose to live healthier lives. And we can empower families with knowledge and resources so they can live better with dementia than so often happens now. And that's why AARP is committed to bringing information and resources to more people. The CEO of AARP nationwide, who you may know, Joanne Jenkins, has identified brain health as a priority for AARP. And in 2019, AARP donated $60 million to the Dementia Discovery Fund, which is an international venture capital fund dedicated to funding breakthrough treatments for Alzheimer's and other dementias. And just last month, Dr. Sanjay Gupta published a new AARP book that I'm going to talk about a little bit more as we're moving on through the materials today. You may have seen this. It's called Keep Sharp, and it too is part of our focus at AARP on empowering people to maintain their brain health as they age. But let me tell you how this became a personal issue for me. So this is my dad, Jack. By the time he reached his 60s, he had become someone other people really didn't want to be around. He'd grown increasingly self-centered and increasingly obsessed with sex. And he didn't seem to care or notice that he made other people uncomfortable. So one by one, other members of my family banned him from coming into their homes because of inappropriate things that he said or inappropriate advances that he made toward their guests. And I limited my interactions with him too, because I didn't want to be around that kind of behavior either. And then in his 70s, he began to have some different problems with balance and walking and incontinence. And as you heard on the video, swallowing. But still, it wasn't until the last year and a half of his life that I came to understand that he had developed, and at that point was in the end stages of a type of dementia that was characterized not by memory loss, but by socially inappropriate behaviors, including hypersexual behaviors. And so that's when I learned that Alzheimer's disease, which is characterized by memory loss, is actually just one type of dementia. And here I was working in the aging field for all my career, and I didn't recognize that what was going on in my own family was dementia. So my experience with my dad made me realize how unprepared my family was for the unhealthy changes that were taking place in my dad's brain as he aged, and how unprepared other families are in our communities and in our nation, really. As a result of my family being unprepared, our family relationships were damaged. Opportunities for joy and togetherness were lost, and estrangement was a result. So let me tell you a few things that you may or may not know about dementia. Some of the stuff that we heard about in those introductory videos. First of all, what is it? So dementia is not a single disease. It's a general term to describe the loss of cognitive and behavioral function in an adult that's severe enough to interfere with that person's daily life and activities. And what cognitive means is cognitive function is thinking skills, memory, problem-solving skills, that sort of thing. Alzheimer's disease is one type of dementia, and it's the most common one. It's the one we tend to hear about the most. Alzheimer's disease accounts for 60 to 80% of the cases diagnosed. And again, you all know what the hallmark symptom of Alzheimer's is: memory loss. One of the most common signs of Alzheimer's disease, as you heard in the videos that we had just leading up to my comments here today, one of the most common signs of Alzheimer's disease, especially in the early stages, is forgetting recently learned information. So a person with Alzheimer's disease may put things in unusual places. They may lose things and be unable to retrace their steps to find them again. You may also find that they ask the same questions over and over. But other types of dementia include vascular dementia, dementia with Lewy bodies, frontotemporal dementia, Huntington's disease, Parkinson's disease dementia, and the type of dementia portrayed in that Will Smith movie, Concussion, which is CTE, or chronic traumatic encephalopathy. And there's more types as well. But talking about each of these just a little bit, these as the most common types. So CTE that I mentioned from the Will Smith movie is a type of dementia that we tend to see in people who were athletes or maybe military veterans, people who sustain traumatic injury to their brains. Now, vascular dementia is the second most common type of dementia, and it's particularly common in African Americans. Vascular dementia is a decline in thinking skills caused by conditions that block or reduce blood flow to various regions of the brain, depriving them of oxygen and nutrients. In vascular dementia, changes in thinking skills sometimes occur suddenly after a stroke, which blocks major blood vessels in the brain. But thinking difficulties may also begin as mild changes that gradually worsen as a result of minor strokes multiple times, or another condition that affects smaller blood vessels, but leads then to widespread damage. Vascular dementia in particular is one that often is mistaken for Alzheimer's. You may have a misdiagnosis one way or the other on those two in particular. Another type of dementia is called dementia with Lewy bodies. That's that L-E-W-Y. And people with dementia with Lewy bodies have some of the symptoms common in Alzheimer's disease, but they're also more likely to have initial or early symptoms of sleep disturbances, visual hallucinations, and visual spatial impairment. Lewy body disease is the type of dementia that Robin Williams had. And since his death in 2014, his wife has written very poignantly about his experience with it. You may have seen there's a recent movie documentary called Spark about Robin Williams. Now, frontotemporal dementia is the most common dementia in people younger than 60 years old. And typical early symptoms of this one, frontotemporal dementia, include notable changes in personality and behavior, or difficulty with producing or comprehending language, the stuff in the frontal temporal lobe of the brain, right? This is the kind of dementia that I learned about because my dad had it, and it led to him exhibiting these very upsetting, inappropriate behaviors. The stuff I mentioned that included inappropriate sexual comments and behaviors, I would get calls, and it was mortifying. I was so embarrassed. But important things that you should know about dementia, two important things everybody should know. One is it's not a normal part of aging. Dementia is caused by diseases or damage to the brain. Also, dementia is not just about memory loss. The specific mental and physical symptoms that someone with dementia may experience will depend on the parts of the brain that are damaged and the disease that's causing the dementia. Based on what part or parts of the brain experience the deterioration, the behavioral changes that a person with dementia will experience will be very different. So not everyone with dementia has a particular problem with memory loss. I know my dad's situation, again, this was a big reason why I didn't recognize what was going on, is he remembered everything, every dentist he had ever had his entire life. Memory was not an issue, right? In that case. But in any case, dementia is about more than just memory loss. Each of these different types of dementia that I mentioned have different symptoms. And they will cause different problems. So as I mentioned, some people have problem with language. They may have trouble remembering words, and it's like you can kind of see it's like they're maybe they're having trouble forming the right word in their brain, but then they get it, and then they have trouble getting that brain to travel to their mouths. Or they may have trouble with concentration or problem solving. Many people with dementia, particularly in later stages, will have trouble with balance and gait and experience falls. And falls are actually the leading cause of hospitalization for people living with dementia. And as I mentioned, for some people, the symptoms are again very different. For some people, their behaviors may become socially inappropriate, like their social filter isn't working anymore. Now, as I said, dementia is not a normal part of aging. The vast majority of older adults do not have dementia, and most will never develop it. However, the older you get, the likelihood that you will end up with dementia does increase. Even though the majority of older adults don't develop dementia, of those people who do have dementia, about 80% of them are people age 75 and older. So what can you do if you suspect that you or a loved one has some sort of dementia? First, talk to a doctor. You can ask about a simple test that you or a loved one can take to help identify presence of cognitive impairment. Then, if need be, you can meet with a neurologist for diagnostic testing to assess your thinking, strength, coordination, reflexes, and more. And sometimes people will ask, why get a diagnosis if there's no cure? You might think, I'd just rather not know, right? Or maybe I don't want to lose my freedom or my dignity if other people find out I have this going on in my brain. But for one thing, new treatments are being developed as we speak. And there may be treatments or clinical research trials that you or your family members might want to get involved with. For example, speech and cognitive therapy have been shown to help people who learn about their dementia early on. And I have personally met people who have benefited greatly from that in life-changing ways. And right here at home in Michigan, there's a lot of exciting research that's being conducted by researchers at the University of Michigan and Wayne State University, Michigan State University, and the Michigan Alzheimer's Disease Research Center in Ann Arbor, which is one of 32 dementia research centers at major medical institutions across the country, and it's funded by the National Institute on Aging. There are also a number of other health conditions that can mimic dementia, such as urinary tract infections or side effects of other or interactions of different medications someone may be taking. And if there are conditions like that that are going on, you want to know about them, right? You want to find out about those so you can address them. But whether a cure is on the horizon or not, knowledge is power. Early diagnosis allows patients and families time to adjust and make plans for how their lives will become different. Time to help preserve or repair family relationships. To make informed decisions about things like housing and transportation and finances. And really just time to recalibrate and reimagine your lives moving forward. Because it will look different. It doesn't have to be bad necessarily, but it's going to be different. One of the items I want to tell you about is the AARP Michigan Dementia Resource Guide for Families up on your screen here. This guide includes information about how to connect with organizations specific to different types of dementia and information about programs and services that you and your family may find helpful. Things like training programs for family caregivers for people who are living with dementia, or where to go to find out about that current research. Too often, our culture tends to think of dementia as a death sentence. We hear the words and our minds jump to that final stage that we just heard about when people talked about the stages on the video there. Our minds jump to that final stage. But we need to think about it differently. We need to think about it the way it is. Not a death sentence, but a chronic disease that a person is likely to live with for many years. And when we do that, when we think about how we're going to live, not just how we're going to die, we can reclaim those opportunities for people to continue to live well with joy and purpose, or at least to live better than so many people with dementia do now. And at this point, I am going to take down my screen for a moment so I can see everyone again. And I know we've got some questions that are coming in to the chat box. So let's take some questions and
all right.
Talk.
Awesome, Lisa. Like, we do have some phenomenal questions, and we'll just go ahead and get started with them. So the first question is, there are times when my loved one is stuck in a loop, for lack of better terms. What are some ways to respond to a question that has already been answered a million times? Or is there a way to bring or coax them out of the loop? Right now, we just keep answering the question as if it's the first time we've ever heard it. We also try to change the subject, but that sometimes just frustrates them.
That is an excellent question. And I can tell it really comes from a place where you are living this now. The things that you described that you are doing are the things that you should be doing. Those are good things. The person asks the question over and over. It's okay to just answer it again. They don't remember. I think one exception to that would be if it seems like it's causing them distress. If they're asking the same question over and over and it's upsetting to them, that is the type of situation in which I would look to try to distract or, bring in something new, a new thing to think or talk about. There are actually some excellent programs that I'm aware of, and I would hope that you would look to as a caregiver that can give you kind of some more ideas and support. So you know about probably the things, the support groups that you hear about with the Alzheimer's Association. There's also, if you look in that resource guide that I mentioned before, I've got some other links in there. There is a program that's out of the University of Michigan Alzheimer's Disease Research Center that is wonderful. It's in actually cooperation with the Michigan State University. It's a project called Thrive that is about empowering caregivers with resources and things to help shore you up. There's also an organization called Universal Dementia Caregivers that I would suggest that I think is really helpful. It's an opportunity for you to be with other caregivers and to learn from people who are kind of professionals in that field, techniques that you can use so that you can continue to do the good work that you are doing to continue to have that relationship, but also importantly, not get yourself too stressed out about it. Things that you can learn perhaps to help preserve your own wellness throughout that journey.
Thank you, Lisa. So this next question, it was, we had 3 different individuals ask some of the same types of questions. So I'll just try to paraphrase this. So it's, if a person is young with these symptoms, how likely is it for a doctor to assess it or catch the early signs of dementia? And then it's, can dementia affect individuals in their 40s and 50s as well?
Mm-hmm. Yes. So excellent questions. Excellent. So short answer first, can dementia affect individuals in the 40s and 50s? Yes. So we know that the older a person is, the more likely that they will develop a sort of dementia. But dementia can affect people at earlier ages, although it is less common. So we will see some people, especially those who might have this kind of rare but specific genetic predisposition toward Alzheimer's. There are some early onset Alzheimer's, but there are also some of these other conditions in particular that create dementia in a person that may not be Alzheimer's. Like I mentioned the situation, the type of dementia that my dad had, that frontotemporal dementia. That's one that people will start to have the manifestations of at an earlier age. Could be like in their 40s, in their 50s. The type of dementia that would come as a result of like repeated brain injuries, like that CTE, is another type that you might see in younger people. So yes, it can happen. You are raising a great point though about, are you likely to get that diagnosed? A lot of people will not have their doctor ever ask them about dementia, Alzheimer's, that kind of stuff. The likelihood that your doctor is going to ask you about it and suggest this will increase with age. If you are a younger person, it's that much less likely that your doctor is going to ask. And I think for younger folks, but really for all this stuff, it's that much more important for us all in our communities to have a better awareness of dementia, different types of dementia, so that when we see things, we can help direct people, we can help direct conversations, suggest that they ask the questions to their doctor, suggest that they look into some of these sources. We really need to build this knowledge base amongst our community.
Thank you. And actually, Lisa, that's a great segue into this next question, which was, it says, in the intro video, there were facts shared about how this disease affects the African-American community. Are you seeing the gap in the disparity shift with your work at AARP? And what are some things that we can do as African-Americans to help close the gap with this?
So I think it would be premature to say that because of our work that we're seeing the gap shrink at this point. But we definitely are seeing some attention to the disparities that I think we have not seen before. And it's really, really important. And this, if you don't mind, I want to talk like maybe a little bit more about this now. I mean, we'll talk more later too, because it's huge. We are now, because we're learning more about brain health generally, starting to see that people can do things to be empowered to take control of their brain health more than we ever thought we could do before. So we know this is out here, and we can look at some of these lifestyle factors that can be modified, and we see certain things in certain communities. Some of them are what they call social determinants of health. And it's like where you live. It's the access you have in your community to grocery stores. It's, do you have a clean environment in which you are living, clean like of, pollution and such? Do you have access to doctors and healthcare throughout your lifetime? These types of things. We know that there are disparities, racial and ethnic disparities in our culture. We know those are happening. We now know, science now knows, that there is a connection between these things and whether somebody is going to be able to maintain their cognitive health as they age. We see these things through science now. At the same time, we know that there are disparities in stigma in communities, how much people are talking about these issues. We see less open conversation. We see stigma across all communities, but we see even more stigma in the African American community than we do in the white community, for example. But there's another issue that is huge, which is that when we look at research in Alzheimer's, other types of dementia, brain health, research has been done over the years, traditionally, of white subjects, mostly white male subjects, mostly white male, fairly affluent subjects. And so for all the information we now have, all the research that is available for us to build our knowledge, we can't feel confident that those findings are necessarily the findings that will apply to the African American community. And that's a big issue. There are a number of organizations beyond AARP. There's a number of organizations that are really getting at this issue. At the Michigan Alzheimer's Disease Research Center in particular, you may have worked with or met before Dr. Edna Rose. There's also Dr. Sharia Robinson Lane. They're both out of the Michigan Alzheimer's Disease Research Center in Ann Arbor. And their efforts in particular have been on getting African Americans more connected with, involved in clinical research. And I think it's something that we really want to get the word out. In our dementia resource guide, there are links to where you can get connected to the types of clinical research that are going on. But if people are interested also, if you don't already have the contact info for Dr. Rose and Dr. Robinson Lane, I'd be happy to share it because they are on a mission to get more African Americans involved in clinical research and close that gap.
Thank you so much, Lisa. We have just a couple more questions and then we'll keep it rolling. Should we do genetic testing, and is there a certain diet? If so, what would you suggest?
So the diet, we're going to talk about that in the second segment. As far as genetic testing, this is a really interesting question ethically and also personally. And from what I have read of people who are more experts in this field than I ever would be, the people who are the scientists and researchers, I've seen kind of a split. And more of them actually that I've talked to and read have said that they would not get the genetic testing. And here's the reasoning for that. So one is, yes, there's this type of gene that people talk about, this APOE gene that is going to show if you have a predisposition to Alzheimer's. Well, one thing is, there are all these other types of dementia. So you might get this and you see you have this gene or you don't. Well, it doesn't mean that you're going to get dementia or not, because yeah, maybe you don't get that kind, but you end up with CTE or you end up with vascular or one of these other types of dementias. So it doesn't give you the clear answer. It doesn't tell you yes or no, I'm going to have this. The other thing that I think is a very interesting observation that the scientists have made on this, who are in the field, is if you get this and you find out, yes, you have it, you can start to have the idea of, oh, I've got this death sentence. But more problematic, they have shared, is that say you get the test and you find out you don't have it. You don't want to think then you're scot-free, right? That you're just like, oh, okay, I'm not going to get it, because you still want to be doing these things we're going to talk about in the second segment. You still want to be doing these healthier behaviors because it's going to make you healthier overall. And it's also going to help you stave off these other types of diseases that could create other cognitive impairment. And so, it's a personal choice. Genetic testing, you can say, yeah, it'll give me some information, but most people are like, it's not the end all.
Thank you so much, Lisa. And this will be the last question, and then we can segue into the next part of our presentation. Someone is asking, what is the actual lifespan from diagnosis? And I know that my grandmother was diagnosed at 67, but she lived until she was 83. So you mentioned your dad was acting out in his 60s. Mm-hmm. What age did he pass, and what is the lifespan once you're diagnosed?
So he passed at 79. So he had it for a long time. For a long time, all but about a year and a half of those, we just thought he was a jerk and a dirty old man, right? So people will tend to live with this for a long time. But you know what? We can't really, I certainly can't, but we can't really say you got this many years because of a lot of factors. Different types of dementia, how you react in terms of how you live your life, paying attention to the healthy things that you need to do for your mind and body can make an impact, but also more, there's so much variation. One of the things that I've heard repeatedly from scientists in the field is they say, if you know one person with dementia, you know one person with dementia. It's so different from one person to another. There are so many different factors. Even when you get a diagnosis, you could have it for a long time and not get a diagnosis. It might be that you only get your diagnosis at the very end stages. In any case, I think the key is that it's important for everybody to start thinking about Alzheimer's and other types of dementia, not as a death sentence, not as a countdown, but as a chronic condition that you're going to live with for likely many years, and learn to live with it, live well, live better with that chronic condition that you or your family member has.
Thank you so much, Lisa. That was very informative, and the questions are awesome. Please continue to drop your questions in the chat so that we can make sure that we get those addressed today, especially if we have the time to do so. So at this time, we would like to play a short personal story video from Clayton Merchant, who is a Lansing native and was the primary caregiver for his father, who was diagnosed with Alzheimer's.
Hi, I'm Clayton Merchant, and I'm here to discuss a journey that me and my father, Thomas Merchant, I brought his most recent obituary with me, had over the last 10 years regarding my care and our relationship and the journey that we've had, the ups and downs. I want to start briefly by mentioning that my mom, Joyce Merchant, also had Alzheimer's. She got Alzheimer's at probably in her early 50s. I had just recently graduated out of high school at that time. And the type of Alzheimer's that she experienced was, it's called frontal lobes, where it basically came in and took over her brain really rapid. Within probably 3 to 5 years of the Alzheimer's setting in, my mom was unable to speak. She always had a good personality. She hummed a lot, and she did a lot of tapping and putzing is what we would call it. And she lived about 10 years with it, actually. So given that, I didn't get a chance to experience any really adult life with my mom. Like I said, I was probably in my early 20s at the time. My father, Thomas Merchant, did an admirable job, a yeomanship job, a wonderful job of taking care of my mom. He was there, dutiful. He was there on a regular basis for her. I'm so proud that he was able to do those things for her. And I think that given that experience with her, and then as he progressed through this dementia, the strength that he had caring for her, I'm quite sure enabled me to be able to be there for him. My father, like I said, my father got dementia, the dementia was set in about 10 years ago. I moved in with him at that time, and we went over to the hospital and got some cognitive testing done. And still at that time, they really couldn't definitively tell us what it was. We just knew that he had something going on at that time. And through the different periods of time that year, I noticed some things changing. I noticed some gaps and spatial gaps in time that he wasn't able to remember things. And then it started increasing probably every year afterwards. My father was the type of person back when he grew up and when he was raising me, very proud man. And I think to a certain extent, this pride could have been a detriment in the fact that he didn't ask for a lot of help when he was taking care of my mom. And I think that when I was able to be part of his life and his journey, I didn't want to have that be a situation for me. I was able to solicit the help of an Alzheimer's Association, a men's group, which I think helped me tremendously. When I went to the association, I was a little bit apprehensive at first because I really didn't know too much about it. But I was suggested, hey, why don't you try this out? So I did. When I went there, most of the gentlemen that was there were caregivers for their wives. I forgot to say it was a caregiver support, men's support group is what it was. So I was the only one really there caring for a parent at that time. I didn't realize what a lot of the individuals there were experiencing. A lot of them were hurt. They were sad. They were frustrated, often pretty angry at the disease. Thing that struck a chord with me, though, is that immediately I found that I had a likeness, and we all had that shared feeling and understanding. And that's important to anybody in life in general, but really important when you're caring for a parent or grandparent or anybody who's experiencing dementia or Alzheimer's. Oftentimes, you feel pretty isolated. You feel alone. You don't think that people really can understand what you're experiencing. And quite honestly, I don't think anybody really can unless you have experienced that. A lot of people know about sundowning and things like that. When you're a caregiver, you hear about that, you read about that, the pamphlets, the men's support group talked about that, as well as my dad's doctors. And in the evening times, they do have a tendency to get a lot worse. You can lose yourself relatively easy in this role. But at the same time, you kind of think about, well, if I'm going through this myself and not understanding what they're able to share with me, just imagine how they feel. And I think that was always at the forefront for me when things got tough, because things do get tough. Staying in the moment is what's so important. Staying in the moment. We would go to jazz concerts and gospel concerts. And I remember one time vividly, we went to a football game on Thanksgiving. And my dad, like I said, he was a fireman, but he was also in the military. And he believed in singing the national anthem the way the national anthem's supposed to be, the way he was brought up. And they were singing the national anthem. And I had went to get some hot dogs, and I came back, and I'm hearing this voice. And my dad, when his youth, was a pretty good singer. And as I was coming back to the seat, all I could hear was my dad's voice over the person that was singing his voice in the stadium. And everybody was around, was just looking back at my dad. And I marveled at how, even in that kind of mindset, he just had a presence and he was able to captivate. And he just was full of life. He just enjoyed that moment. Remember that however you're feeling during this frustration, this hurt, they're experiencing it tenfold. And how is that? What do you do with that? You just keep going. You keep going. Some of the things that I mentioned before I came here, as I just wrote down some things just to kind of be somewhat prepared, is perseverance. I call it the 10 P's, possibly, if you want to call it that. That may possibly help. For one, I talked about the opportunities and looking at it as a possibility that you can do to give back to what your mother, father, grandma, grandpa did for you. So perseverance is 10. I'm gonna rank these from 10 to 1. I can't say enough how perseverance plays into this. Each day could be different. Like I mentioned before, you could wake up at 7 o'clock, get breakfast, get your routines in, which is very important for people that are taking care of somebody with dementia. Your routines, they get used to this, they get accustomed to this. So whatever routine that you have in the morning, in the afternoon, in the evening, and bedtime, and then you do it all over again the next day, is that perseverance that's going to keep you going and keep on the forefront that just opportunity that you're able to be here. It's a blessing that you're able to do what you're able to do. You're going to find some struggles. It's impossible to not. But your perseverance and your way of looking at the journey, I think, helps tremendously. And productivity, I put productivity as next. You have to also carve out your own time, whether that be an hour, whether it be getting some respite from somebody else that could possibly come in, but you have to stay productive. You have to stay connected to society, to other things that's going on, because it is consuming. Depending on your level of care that you're providing, it's important that you stay productive, because when you're able to spend that time, you're a little bit more refreshed. You're not so drained on a regular basis, because this can be a draining process. I put here personality. The personality of the person that you're caring for and your own personality plays into it. I mentioned about pride. I put pride here as number 7. You have to ask for help. You have to ask for help. My mom died, like I said, of Alzheimer's. And one of the biggest regrets I know that I had from my dad is that he didn't ask for a lot of help. Staying positive is 6. As I mentioned before, I try to stay positive as much as possible. There's days where I really couldn't do it. There's days where I would just have to take a time out. We lived in the same house. Sometimes I just said, Dad, I can't today. Professionalism is another one I put on here. And that speaks of the people that you may want to solicit for the caregiving. I had numerous people come into the house. I would get calls when I'm at my job. And it's kind of funny, but in some ways, they would say, Clayton, they say, your dad kicked us out. And I'm like, what? He would kick them out. He didn't want them to come. He didn't want them to be there. And so I'd have to go through another agency and bring another one in and take the time to interview and find out the right fit. You know, what do they do? Do the research on them. So the professionalism plays a big key into the support that you get. People, as I mentioned, I went to an Alzheimer's support group, a men's support group. I needed that. I needed other people around. I needed to be able to share what I was going through. I needed to not isolate. I don't think that I would have been able to survive 8 to 10 years as my dad's progression went, if I didn't have some sense of people, some outlets to bounce things off, to just sometimes just to cry. Planning is my third one on the list, and again, I'm going from 10 to 1. I don't want to say this is a dark thing, a dark topic to talk about Alzheimer's, because it's not as real and it's more prevalent now than ever before. But as a community, and as we don't do a whole of planning in this area, family members need to be on board. They need to discuss with each other, what are we going to do? What are we going to do with mom and dad, or when they get to certain levels? Who's going to play this role? I don't think over planning could ever hurt in this situation. And then you also have to be respectful for the person's wishes and were things put in place, whether that be will, whether that be who's going to be power of attorney, financial, medical, legally. All these things play into it. So the planning is key, because you want to be able to spend time, quality time with your loved one. You don't want to have to worry, react to things if you didn't need to. 2, patience. As I mentioned before, about some times where I would get frustrated and have to kind of get my own space. It's just patience. My dad taught me a lot. He taught me a lot in my life. I'm 53 years old, and I wouldn't be half the person I am now if it wouldn't be for my dad. And then the final thing, and number one thing on my list, is prayer. Each and every day, I woke up and just asked for my help, asked for help from God. I know without a fact that I couldn't have done anything without my praying each and every day, asking for help in the morning, giving thanks at the end of the day.
Wow. So how powerful is that, right? It takes a lot of courage to share our personal journey. And we want to thank Clayton for sharing those. And he offered us 10 P's, and it was from his perspective, from his personal experience. And I'm just going to share those. So 10 was perseverance. Remember that this is a marathon and not a sprint, especially if you are the caregiver. Productivity, carving out time for you as the caregiver. Personality, knowing and understanding your loved one, and even maintaining your own personality throughout this experience. 7 was pride. Know when to ask for help. I know it's hard for us, especially as an African American community, to just get to a place where we know that we need help. And in this process, in this journey, you have to be able to know when to ask for help. Number 6 was positive. So staying positive. Some days are going to be tougher than others, and we have to make sure that we just maintain a level of positivity. Number 5, he mentioned, was professionalism. And that is imperative when selecting a caregiver. So make sure that you understand what you're looking for in a caregiver and make sure that they meet those needs. Number 4 was people. Search for people or groups that will support you through this process, because you are not an island and you cannot do it alone. Number 3 was planning. So having a plan in place for your loved ones, estate planning, or just something as simple as a will. What are your loved ones' wishes? And you want to make sure that you have a plan in place, because this allows you to focus on being present when you're providing care and not worrying about those times when you're at the late stages or end stages of Alzheimer's or dementia. Number 2, patience. And this goes right back to another point. It's a marathon. You know, it's not a sprint. and you have to be able to be patient with the process. And the final and most important one is prayer. So know where your help comes from and seek that help. So at this time, now what I'll do is turn it back over to our phenomenal specialist, Lisa Cooper. And please remember to put your questions in the chat. And remember that we will be doing a phenomenal drawing at the end, but you must be present to win. There you go, Lisa.
Thank you, Rashane. And yeah, I want to echo what you just said about the story that Clayton shared. I loved the stories of the experiences of joy that he had, like when they were at the game and his dad was singing the national anthem. And also his testimony about the value of being with other caregivers. This, I think, is a really important point, that you don't need to walk this path alone. I know that my own passion about these issues and sharing this information, and the passion that I've seen in the AARP and Alzheimer's Association volunteers that I've worked with is, so many of us felt like we had to reinvent or invent the wheel, with our family situation. And people, we don't want you to have to feel like you have to reinvent the wheel. We want to share the information that's out there to give you that leg up. But, we're going to kind of shift here at this point and move into what I think of as the power hour. This is the part of this program where we're going to talk about taking control of our brain health for ourselves and our families and our communities. And I'm going to do a share screen here again as we move into this segment. And as I'm doing that, one of the things I see, it did have a question that was kind of left from the last segment, but it totally segues us into this segment. And I see from Jill asking about if this is a hereditary disease, if Alzheimer's or if dementia is hereditary. And one of the things that I think is so positive and so important for us to hear about the recent developments in brain science is, and this is from the Sanjay Gupta book that I'm going to talk a little bit about, but we actually, brain science is telling us now that genes account for under 7% of people's lifespan versus 20 to 30%, which had been kind of the previous estimates. And what it comes down to is 90% of our health as we age and our longevity and how we are going to be able to live well as we age, 90% is in our own hands. And I know in my personal life, honestly, I never paid much attention to brain health until I became a caregiver for my dad. But after I had that experience, I realized basically two things came to mind. Two questions were front of mind for me. One is what we've been talking about. Now that my family member has dementia, what can I do to help that person still have a good quality of life? But the second is, what can I do to keep this from happening to my brain? And this is where the brain science comes in and the exciting findings in the recent years. So there have been tremendous advances in the past 10 years or so. And science now tells us that regardless of our age, there are steps that we can take, things that we can do to reduce the chance of age-related diseases and optimize our chance of maintaining our cognitive health. Regardless of age, our brain is constantly changing and can make new brain cells. Now, I am going to share a disclaimer. So Rashane read my bio at the beginning of the event today. And this whole event is intended as information. It's not medical advice or diagnosis or treatment, because I'm a lawyer and I'm a policy wonk, but I'm not a doctor and I can't provide you with specific advice or medical recommendations. But here's where the information that I'm talking about comes from. So beginning in 2015, AARP convened the Global Council on Brain Health, an international collaborative of scientists, health professionals, scholars, and policy experts working in the field of brain health. And I'm sorry for my dog making some sounds. He thinks that I've not been paying attention to him in the last hour, which is largely true. But the Global Council on Brain Health focuses on brain health regarding or relating to people's ability to think and reason as they age. And that, as we mentioned earlier, includes aspects of memory, perception, and judgment. So the Global Council on Brain Health works this way. They debate the latest advancement in brain health scientific research to reach a consensus on what works and what doesn't. Their goal is to cut through the clutter to offer the best possible advice about what older adults can do to maintain and improve their cognitive health. And so since 2016, the Global Council on Brain Health has brought together 94 experts from 23 different countries and 80 different universities and organizations to reach a consensus on the state of the science. To date, they've published 12 reports that you can find online at aarp.org/brain health. If you follow the link at the bottom of this slide, it will take you directly to the series of reports that the Global Council has published, along with related background information. And then another excellent resource that I want to share with you is this book that I mentioned earlier. Earlier this year, Dr. Sanjay Gupta published this new AARP book called Keep Sharp as part of our focus on empowering people to maintain their brain health as they age. And you may know him as a medical correspondent for CNN, but he is also literally a brain surgeon. So if you don't want to thumb through all the research yourselves, his book does a terrific job of putting it all together. And he suggests specific steps that you may be interested in trying out in your own life. So briefly, what are the scientific findings that we need to know about? It used to be conventional wisdom that we were born with a finite number of neurons or nerve cells in our brain for life. When we damaged any of them, we couldn't replace them. We used to think, oh, you're drinking, you're killing brain cells. Now science has shown it's different than what we believed. Our bodies can actually generate new brain cells under the right circumstances. There's a reservoir of neural stem cells that are continually replenished, and they can differentiate into brain neurons. This concept is called neurogenesis. It is now understood that the brain constantly and dynamically shapes and reshapes itself in response to experiences, learning, or even an injury. This is referred to as neuroplasticity. The brain remains plastic throughout life and can rewire itself in response to your circumstances. The ability of the brain to form and reorganize synaptic connections is pretty amazing. What's more, how you choose to focus your attention rewires, or what you choose to focus your attention on rewires the brain from a structural and a functional perspective. And we don't usually think about dementia when we're entering our prime middle age years, the 35, 45, 55, but we should, because it provides a remarkable opportunity to shape our aging experience in a very positive way. So what's the key to better brain health? It turns out it's not a pill or a superfood, but a combination of tried and true healthy habits that AARP refers to as the 6 pillars of brain health. And much of this stuff is stuff that you probably learned in high school health class, or things that your doctor has told you to do, at least in part. But hopefully, knowing that these things are linked to your likelihood of being able to remain mentally sharp as you age might give you some extra motivation to take action. I know it has for me. So, what are the 6 pillars of brain health? The overall message is to pay special attention to staying physically active, getting enough good quality sleep, reducing stress, eating healthy food, staying mentally active, and socially connected. According to current brain health research vetted by AARP's Global Council on Brain Health, the 6 pillars of a brain healthy lifestyle are move, discover, nourish, connect, relax, and sleep. And there is a lot that we could talk about with regard to each of these. There are entire books that are written about each one of these. But today, I just want to touch on each of these briefly, and to stress the point that these pillars are important for all of us, regardless of our age, and regardless of whether you have dementia or not. How you tend to these pillars may look different depending on your age and your current health, and whether you currently have dementia or another chronic condition. But there are still benefits to your body and your brain to pay attention to these things. So first, let's discuss the importance of making sure you keep moving. The importance of exercise. The various experts tapped by the Global Council on Brain Health have different thoughts about which of the 6 pillars is most important. Is it exercise or sleep or diet? But Dr. Sanjay Gupta is convinced that exercise is one pillar we should never neglect because its benefits have been so strongly demonstrated time and again. Dr. Gupta believes the most important thing people can do to enhance their brain's function and resiliency to disease is exercise, as in move more and keep a regular fitness routine. One of the things he advises is, instead of spending money on brain supplements advertised on TV that have not been shown to have a beneficial effect on your cognitive health, you should invest that money in a good pair of running shoes instead. Now, research shows that being physically active helps repair and protect chemicals in the brain, increase your circulation, improve your metabolism, reduce anxiety, improve your sleep, which we're going to talk about in just a moment, and reduce the risk of diabetes, heart disease, depression, and stroke, which is especially important because diabetes, the high blood pressure, obesity, high cholesterol, especially at midlife, can substantially increase your chances of developing dementia later in life. Now, this doesn't mean that you have to become a marathon runner or join a gym. You just need to move more. And the benefits of exercise are important for older adults, whether you have dementia or not. Maintaining physical activity while taking precautions for safety is especially important for people living with dementia who tend to have lower levels of physical activity and motor function compared to older people without dementia. Dementia, as we talked about, particularly in the later stages, can lead to generalized weakness, gait changes, and balance impairments. Reduced physical activity in people with dementia leads to a decrease in muscle mass and strength, and then that further cycles them downward to increase their weakness and their risk for falls. And falls are the leading cause of hospitalization for people living with dementia. So especially important to maintain your muscle mass and strength. Now, the second pillar of brain health is continuing to discover new things, learn new things. Studies show that challenging your brain in new ways throughout life or exercising your brain helps strengthen your brain. Our brain is stimulated and grows when we learn new things or pursue new interests. So it's good for your brain to stay curious. Give yourself mental workouts by doing something that challenges your thinking, offers enjoyment, and encourages you to grapple with new and complex ideas. Maybe learn a challenging new game or try out a new hobby. Interestingly, it's not enough, the science says, it's not enough to do crosswords or Sudoku. Brain training videos and games like crosswords can improve working memory, the ability to retrieve information. So they're fine in that regard. But the benefits do not extend to other brain functions, such as reasoning and problem solving, which are key to cognitive reserve. So scientists say it's better to do something like take a class, which requires a greater variety of skills to be used. The third pillar is good nutrition, because what you eat has a big impact on your brain. We had a question about this in the first segment. And although there's no specific diet that's been proven to maintain or improve brain health, studies have found that certain eating plans help with cognition. These eating plans include the Mediterranean diet, the DASH diet, or dietary approaches to stop hypertension, and the MIND diet, which is a hybrid of the two. MIND stands for Mediterranean Dash Intervention for Neurodegenerative Delay. Got that? In the book by Dr. Sanjay Gupta, there is information about these different types of diets. And there's also books that are written about the MIND diet. In general, these plans call for eating less meats and sweets and consuming more fish, nuts, beans, whole grains, leafy green vegetables, and healthy fats such as olive oil. In 2020, the Global Council on Brain Health published a report called the Brain-Heart Connection, and that lists the recommendations to manage cardiovascular risks for brain health. Studies of large groups of people over several decades have found decreases in dementia occurring simultaneously with their improvements in cardiovascular health. So while more research is still needed, as we talked about, a reasonable rule of thumb is that what's good for the heart is good for the brain. What's good for the heart is good for the brain. Related, it's important, it's better to get your nutrients from real food instead of supplements for a variety of reasons, why and how your body makes use of those nutrients. And the other thing that I think is so important, and it was actually news to me to learn this, is that we need to pay special attention to making sure that we drink enough water, because as we age, our ability to perceive thirst diminishes. So dehydration is another leading cause for admission to emergency rooms for older adults. And a good rule of thumb on that is, if you're an older adult and you feel any thirst, you have waited too long. So keep drinking water, keep drinking water. The fourth pillar of brain health is connecting or staying socially engaged. Studies show that people who have good social networks live longer and are physically and mentally healthier than people who are socially isolated. Connecting with other people is stimulating and can add meaning and purpose to our lives. And in fact, experts say that social connectedness is a key predictor of health and independence in our later years. And again, this is really important, whether a person has dementia or not. It's healthy to keep engaging with friends, family, and community, and to seek out people who share your interests. Volunteering is a great way for people to stay socially engaged and to experience living with meaning and purpose. And for many people, pets can bring great joy and companionship in our day-to-day lives, although they also are known for disrupting Zoom presentations. But sadly, The connect pillar, in particular, is one that tends to get neglected in the lives of people living with dementia, and that contributes to a deterioration in their overall condition. The fifth pillar of brain health is keeping your stress levels down. Stress reduction might include activities like meditation or controlled breathing, even something as simple as sitting quietly and counting your breaths, taking slow, deep breaths in and out. Meditation is something that spiritual leaders have advised people to do for centuries. And now, more recently, science has actually been able to document the physical benefits to the human brain when we meditate on an ongoing practice, as an ongoing practice. And smiling, laughing, and a good sense of humor also help keep stress levels down. So it turns out participating in fun activities with people who make you laugh or watching funny shows on TV is actually literally good for you. Now, last but not least, the sixth pillar of brain health is getting good sleep, which allows your brain to relax and recharge. So if you have already fallen asleep during this presentation, good for you. Getting enough sleep is essential. Both REM sleep, when you dream, and NREM, or non-REM sleep, which is the state of deep sleep when you're not dreaming. Good sleep techniques are also referred to as good sleep hygiene, and they include getting 7 to 9 hours of sleep in a 24-hour period, maintaining a regular sleep schedule, sleeping in a cooler room. Some sleep scientists suggest 65 degrees as the ideal, adjusting your intake of caffeine to be earlier in the day, and reducing exposure to light prior to sleep. It's normal for sleep to change with age, but poor quality sleep with age is not normal. Poor quality sleep is not normal at any age. There is a book titled Why We Sleep by Matthew Walker, PhD, that I highly recommend, either to read or to listen to as an audiobook. Getting a full night's sleep has so many benefits, and yet we as adults in modern America are horrible at it. As a society, I think we have done ourselves a real lot of damage by undervaluing sleep. Here we have this magic elixir, sleeping, this incredible tool that's available to us as humans to help balance and maintain our physical and our mental health. Yet too often, we just don't use it. In fact, we tend to glorify people being able to get by with only a few hours of sleep per night, even though science shows that people are more productive and tend to live longer and healthier lives when adults get 8 hours of sleep per night. Did you get 8 hours of sleep last night? If you do one thing differently as a result of today's program, I personally hope that you will look at your sleep and look at the things that you can do that might be things that you can adjust in order to begin getting 8 hours of sleep per night. So to put it all together, even though science doesn't have all the answers yet, we know there are at least steps that we can all take to improve the health of our brains. When it comes to Alzheimer's disease and other dementias, prevention remains the best medicine, and it's the one thing that has been proven effective. No matter your age, the keys are to stay mentally, socially, and physically active, pay special attention to having a healthy diet, getting good quality sleep, and enough of it, and reducing your stress levels. For more information on the topics I touched on today, I invite you to visit the AARP websites on this slide. And again, I want to thank you for inviting me to talk with you about these issues today. And I hope I was able to deliver on my 2 promises to you, which is to leave you with a feeling of hope and to provide you information that you can use to empower yourself with regard to your and your loved ones' brain health now and for the future. Because the best time to take action to improve your brain health is today. Regardless of our age, there are things we can do. We don't have to feel powerless. We don't have to feel hopeless. Just start with small steps and try to do something every day. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Lisa. Can we give her a virtual thank you, everyone? This was some phenomenal information, Lisa. Thank you so much for your willingness to participate and share this great information with us. We do have just, I think it's just 2 questions so far in the for you. The first one actually is, so 3 questions. So the first one is, can you please put the title of the book that you referred to in the chat? Like, can we have that available to us? That was one.
Let's see so there was the Mind Diet.
Can you put both?
Yep. And then there was Why We Sleep, and I can put that in there.
Okay.
And then the Sanjay Gupta book, which I love it so much. You can see how I've tabbed this because I tabbed it every time I thought there was something that was such a good point and I needed to remember it and share it. And that's how many tabs I ended up with. But
yeah,
yes,
we can have those. That would be great.
I can type those in. I can even, I don't know if we want to email. I don't know if as we're answering the questions, maybe I'll do it. We'll answer the questions, other questions we may have. And then while you're going through doing the wrap up and the prizes and that, I'll type in the book names and authors and that into the chat.
All right, thank you. So the first question is, you mentioned about something being hereditary. Is Alzheimer's or any form of dementia a hereditary disease, and can it be?
So we kind of touched on this a little bit. It is, we know that there are factors. We think about this all the time. Is it, is it genetic or is it environmental? When we talk about hereditary. So one of the things that we are seeing with the brain science, the research in the more recent years is that a lot less of this is controlled by our genes. That said, there are some genes, like we talk about that APOE gene with regard to Alzheimer's. There are some, our genetics are involved in this. There's also, okay, I'm going to pull out a 4th book. I don't know if I'm going to be able to type fast enough to put all these in, but here, the telomere effect. Dr. Surrey Eaton and I talk about this book sometimes. This talks about kind of your gene and your cell health. And I think that to me is the more important thing to think about when we're thinking about our genes and our cell health and our are we going to get this because my mom and dad had this kind of way of thinking about this? It's quite possible if your mom and dad, it's more likely that if your mom or dad had dementia that you will have it. But why is that? So we can say there's some genes, but you know what is also in there is that you learn the recipes that you make from your mom. You eat the same foods as what you were raised with. We learn these recipes. I mean, especially we talked about the higher incidence of vascular dementia in the African American communities. Think about the recipes that you learned. So I'm white, but I was born in Kentucky. And so I learned a lot of these recipes like, macaroni and cheese and, all the fried stuff. Our parents have been eating this stuff. They taught us how to make this stuff. And that kind of stuff makes it more likely that we're going to do a lot of those things that we could actually control. But if we don't control, we are more likely to go down the same path. Oh my gosh, who is putting in? Hope is putting in the books in the chat. And I'm so glad because I cannot type fast enough. Thank you very much. Thank you very much for that.
Thank you, Lisa. So we do have all of the resources, the books that Lisa referenced are actually in the chat. So please take some time and look those up and grab them so that we can all have knowledge, more knowledge.
You know, one thing too, I noticed, oh, I'm sorry, like in the chat, you know, and I noticed that Carmen and others have been putting in the links that I talked about for the resource guides and such. If you are a person that likes just to have the booklet in your hand, if you want to share, I don't know if you want to do it in the chat, or Rashane, if people get you addresses, we can mail. I have copies of our AARP Dementia Resource Guide in booklet format, and I'm happy to mail you one if anybody would just like to have the booklet in their hands as opposed to looking online.
This was a wonderful event. On behalf of Delta Sigma Theta Sorority Incorporated, Lansing Alumni Chapter, we would like to thank you for joining us on this morning. I hope that the information that was provided was very helpful in caring for a loved one, or just, you know, the brain health piece was very, very helpful. Let's all remember the 6 pillars that were discussed. I would like a special thank you to Lisa, I hope I'm pronouncing your name right, Denton Cooper, our specialist from AARP. My dear friend Clayton, you touched me so. I just thank you for sharing your journey with your dad. Thank you so much for that. Monique Harvey, another dear friend of mine. I can't thank you enough for all your hard work on the video. It was wonderful. The presentation was wonderful. Our tech team, Hope Rollins, Carmen Harden, and Tracy Webb. Thank you, Soros, for your diligence in helping us with this program. And lastly, but not least, my SANS, our PP&D committee, Rashane, the MC, Sonia Quinney, our chairperson, Malika Gregory, and Tafari Jenkins. I love you all. Thank you so much.